Well, do have a seat, Prime Minister. I won't be longer than about 45 minutes. And you are most welcome. You're most welcome to the 18th conference of Australians for a Constitutional Monarchy, the 18th since the referendum. And we're doing it with the Monarchist League of Australia, the Victorian branch. We have a wonderful digital team and superb things going on in ACM. We're rejuvenating. And one of the digital people, John Alton over there, our digital specialist, is also going to rejuvenate me, and I really need that. I was reading last night that an astrolabe is a device used in astronomy. And it comes from classical antiquity, being invented by Apollonius of Phrygia in 220 BC. Astrolabe is also the name of a hitherto unknown inbred animal related to the Tasmanian devil, found particularly in Hobart. This animal is unusually unattractive and tends to give off a pungent odour. Tourists are warned that while the astrolabe distracts visitors by seemingly to be friendly, it will then suddenly change into an uncontrollable rage, the principal feature of which is to headbutt. These attacks marked unusual cowardice, deception, and viciousness. But the animal is particularly unintelligent because the animal leaves a trail and is then quickly found by the authorities. I was reading that visitors to Tasmania are warned not to approach the astrolabe, not only because he has smell and loathsome appearance, but also that he's given to making ear-splitting, non-melodious noises. One of the few skills I've learned over the years, I think, is that I've been able to recognize in young soldiers, in those soldiers who in their knapsacks have the bâton du maréchal, the baton of a field marshal. I think I've been very good in recognizing leadership. And I must say that many, many years ago, at Australians for Constitutional Monarchy, when I met the young executive director and walked down with him to a restaurant, found it difficult to walk with him because I found myself unconsciously copying his walking style, which of course on a person like me looks absolutely ridiculous. I saw there a future leader. I was absolutely sure of that, because he has all of the qualities of a leader: strong commitment to principle, courage, and an ability to campaign and to fight, and loyalty. And I found this so fascinating. Political parties do need leaders. They're not just collectives. They need a leader who merges, who doesn't take the party into lockstep. And this is so often the fate, particularly of conservative parties. They go in lockstep with their socialist predecessors, and you got that with Ted Heath. They say this far and no further, and they accept everything that's been done. But every so often there is a leader who emerges, a Margaret Thatcher, a Ronald Reagan, a John Howard, who says, no, we're going to reverse this. And I think this is the great characteristic that Tony has exhibited throughout his political career. He is a leader, and I look forward to his being, as my friend Nick Hobson said, the 30th Prime Minister of Australia. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Tony Abbott.
Well, David, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a thrill to be here to address my fellow constitutional monarchists. And I wonder if I could begin by taking you back to April of 1993. It was a bit of a low ebb for me. The Hewson-led opposition had managed to lose the unlosable election, and I'd been sacked. And I was sitting in our little house in St Peters in Sydney, wondering how I was going to pay the mortgage. And I had a phone call from the late great Labor luminary Jono Johnson, who was something of a mentor to me. And Jono said to me in this phone call, he said, brother, it's time for you to come back to your true home. And I said, Jono, I've never left the church. And he said, no, your other true home, the Labor Party. And I said, well, Jono, it's true that I'm not very happy with my former boss, John Hewson. And it's true that I have a lot of respect for you and for at least some of your colleagues in the Labor Party. But if there's one thing that really annoys me right now, it's Paul Keating and this constant campaigning for a republic. There was a long pause. And Jono said to me, he said, comrade, there is no hope for you. And he put down the phone. But as things turned out, a few weeks later, I joined Australians for Constitutional Monarchy as its first executive director. We had the long and ultimately successful campaign to defeat the 1999 referendum. And in the years since, the monarchy has gained new generations of supporters, particularly because of the innate appeal of the younger royals. And yet, despite all these things, we can't take the continued existence of the Crown and our Constitution for granted. For one thing, the Leader of the Opposition, Bill Shorten, has promised that within the first term of a Labor government, there will be a plebiscite. This is the sort of plebiscite that he supported. There will be a plebiscite on whether Australia should become a republic. So we have to be ready to fight this issue again. And I suppose we need to be ready to fight it on, in some ways, even less promising ground than that which we found in the mid to late 1990s. For one thing, the objective of the Republicans is to try to ensure that it's not any particular Republican model that's put to the people next time, but simply the Republican idea. Now, anything which discredits our existing system of government without proposing a specific alternative in its place is nothing less than constitutional vandalism. And yet, in order to secure a political objective, this is what at least some of the Republicans want to do to our country. They want to discredit our existing system of government, a system which has served us well for almost 120 years with nothing specific to put in its place. So the first thing we need to do is to constantly refresh the arguments in favour of the Crown in our Constitution. And the most obvious thing that the Crown brings to our Constitution and our system of government is a wonderful stability. When you look around the world, and that's what I was doing this afternoon, metaphorically at least, when you look around the world, to the best of my reckoning, there are only 7 countries which have been continuously democratic since the turn of the 20th century. The United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Sweden and Switzerland. And of those 7 countries, 5 of them are constitutional monarchies and 4 of them are constitutional monarchies under the British Crown. You see, the great thing about our system is that it provides the public with a focus of loyalty which is above and beyond politics, which is above and beyond political partisanship. And particularly at times of instability in party politics, it's more important than ever than we have the stability which only the Crown can bring. The other great thing about our system is that it gives us a share in what, apart from the papacy, is the oldest continuing institution of Western civilization. The Crown that began in England all those centuries ago and which now exists in 14 other countries as well, is, next to the papacy, the oldest continuing institution in our civilization. And it's rested very easily on our head every moment of our existence since 1788, and long may it continue. There have been some ups and downs, obviously, over the years. Most of you, like me, lived through the difficulties of the early 90s, the year in particular that the Queen described as annus horribilis. And yet, in December 2013, just a few months into my Prime Ministership, it was my great privilege to help to welcome Prince William, Kate and George, not just to Australia, but to my own electorate. There were two events they did in my electorate. The first was a visit to Bear Cottage, a hospice for very, very sick, indeed mostly terminally ill children in my electorate. When I arrived about 10 minutes or so before the Royals were due to get there, I was delighted to find several hundred people having a barbecue in the street. What a wonderfully friendly and so typically Australian gesture of welcome to the young Royals. The visit, as you can imagine, went remarkably well. William and Kate were charm itself, kindness itself to the children and their parents. And then, of course, I drove down the hill to Manly Beach for a meet and greet between the Royals and the young nippers of the Queenscliff, North Stane and Manly Surf Lifesaving Clubs. And as the car went down Darley Road onto the flat of Manly, I was struck by the number of people standing on the street, waving flags and cheering. And by the time we got down towards the Corso, they were 4 deep. By the time we got to the beach itself, they were 20 deep. The police estimated that there were 20,000 people there. They'd all turned out to see these young scions of the royal family. I think there were at least 20,000 people. And as the car pulled up, I have to confess that I got quite choky with emotion, because I never thought, having lived through the dark days of the early 1990s, that I would live to see such a display of affection by ordinary Australians for the royal family. And it was a reminder of the continuing magic of the Crown, the continuing magic of the monarchy. Our job is not to recreate that because it's not ours to do. Our job is to defend the institution. Our job is to assert the effectiveness of a system of government which is based on the Crown. And I believe that we can do it. It will not be easy. But let us never forget exactly what we were able to achieve back in the 1990s. In those days, support for a republic, at least if opinion polls are to be believed, sometimes reached almost 60%. Support for the monarchy sometimes sank almost to 30%. At the time of the referendum itself, every single newspaper in the country was against the monarchy. And yet, it was a 55 to 45% thumping victory for the Crown in our Constitution. And it wasn't a campaign that was backed by celebrities. It wasn't a campaign that was flush with funds. It was simply the persistence of ordinary people asserting what they believed to be best for our country and saying, we're not doing this because we are necessarily enamoured of any particular individual. We are doing this because we love our country and we want what's best for our country, and what's best for our country is the stability that only the Crown can lend. So that is our challenge going forward, as it was our challenge back then. I certainly think that we're up for it, and I certainly intend to play my part in the struggles to come, just as I did in the struggles that we've seen. And David, thank you so much for your help and friendship over the years. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for everything you have done for our country and for our Constitution.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great privilege to move the vote of thanks to our friend and the 28th Prime Minister of Australia, Tony Abbott. I'm reminded that society is a partnership between those who have gone before us, those who are living today, and those who are yet to come. And Tony knows that only too well, having formed a group back in the days when I was at uni, which was to sort of foster young people. I won't say talent because I wouldn't have been part of that group, but to sort of help people to understand what the responsibilities that we have today to protect and to test those things that come before us. And the Republic is one such example of things which have tested the past the test of time. So we must be very careful in any change which comes forward. And I know that in other areas, of course, Tony applies that same logic in testing those proposals. And it's not that we're opposed to any constitutional change, but we must test it against what has worked for the past, what works today, and what will work in the future. So if you would join with me in thanking Tony for his address today, in the usual fashion. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have to rise to join the team in taking the health of the nation to the Queen. The Queen. Thank you so much.